Well, welcome everybody to the Contact Exec podcast. And I have got, I think, a new friend here with me today. Joe and I have some they have a topic very near and dear to my heart, which is, GCs and subcontractors and how they communicate. Joe Leiva from Kaster. Man, it's good to meet you. And I'm excited to talk to you about Kaster and how it got started, where y'all come from, and just, man, let's just talk about it. What's Kaster all about?
Yeah, Robert, I'm excited too. It's a pleasure to meet you. I appreciate you inviting me on this show as well. So looking forward to the conversation. So, I'm Joe. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kaster. And what we do essentially is we are a subcontractor compliance platform, and we specialize in automating and streamlining certified payroll workflows, workforce reporting participation to meet public works requirements that are mandated on a lot of these jobs, and other miscellaneous, compliance documentation, which is something that I grew up around, lived and breathed myself. You know, Part of what got me into construction is that I grew up in a construction household. My parents own and operate still to this day a subcontractor business in the Washington, D.C. area based out of Maryland. For the past 40 years, they've been running the operation and mainly specializing in heavy civil work. So, think of jobs with your lanes, your floors, your Walshes, your Clarks, your Shirleys, the Dragaloses of the world, right?
Oh, yeah,
So
know
they
them well.
yeah. So, at first I went to school, I had one plan to do, I was doing the pre-med. I thought that was a route that had been still in my brain since I was a kid, that's what I was going to do. And then, I discovered after volunteering at a hospital near Baltimore that in an emergency room that it wasn't my style,
Yeah, it's a
so I
tough
went
gig.
ahead. Yeah. So went ahead and, asked my dad what it would take for, him to include one of his children as in part of the company. Right. And really it was about getting your civil engineering degree from a good university, getting your PE license, and prove to me that you can run the show on some jobs. So, go get your boots and, go jump in the trenches and, learn the hard way. So I spent
Yeah,
years doing that.
fantastic. Well, yeah, my background's a little different. I actually went to school at Purdue University and ended up couldn't get a job out of the Cold War was over, so all the engineering jobs were lost to the Cold War. Now that just goes to show my age, but yeah. So I just started framing houses, and so kind of born on a stack A. Started at the bottom, and an apprentice, just learning the trades, and joined the union. Ended up working large commercial jobs in Indy. And then I ended up moving down to Texas and start my own business. I kind of bought myself a job. So, and then, like I said, 30 years later, here I am going, how did I get here? Right. How did this all happen? I never thought I would be, 30 years in the business, but here I am. And then, these kind of things, when we start talking about what you guys do, one of my biggest complaints was, and I even posted on it, I think today, talking about collaboration and communication between GCs and subs, right? Or just collaboration and communication between maybe a GC and their technology provider, or collaboration and communication between the sub and their technology provider. Trying to figure out a way to get people to get the details straight. And it used to be, the only way you're going to do it is like pick up the phone, make a phone call, send an email, those types of things. But tell me more about how Kaster kind of solves some of these issues that we see where there's just some sort of miscommunication going on.
Yeah. And by the way, speaking about that old school mentality that that you grew up with and I learned from my dad was, if you need something, just pick up the phone. It's a lot easier, right? And I still do that to this day, by the way, with my clients and with our subcontractors. I'm happy to take on support calls here and there when I can. So I think that's something that we should always do, as founders, to
Absolutely. Yeah,
stay in
absolutely.
contact with
It
them.
still works, the phone still works, folks. I hate to say this to all you youngsters out there who are specifically saying, well, I sent them an email. Well, guess what? The phone still works, and usually works pretty quick. So I want to know more. let's get into a bit more detail about Kaster. What is it doing? How's it helping those subcontractors out? Let's get into that.
Yeah. I mean, the story really begins. I'll preface it a bit of background on what inspired it, and I'll get into what it does. And that part of what led me to develop Caster with my team is that uh, I work closely with my family's business, and I saw how important it is to receive timely monthly requisition payments, right? I mean, we're talking at least net 45 or even sooner if you can get that. When you start pushing things beyond that to 60, net 90, it really impacts the subcontractor because they got to keep up with their line of credit payments,
Right.
their rental equipment. You got suppliers breathing down your neck that are, beyond net 90 because you're waiting to get paid in order to pay them.
Yeah, they're
Uh,
not a bank. Yeah, they're not a bank.
yeah. And so I just saw, like, even with my college education, being, born and raised in this country, being, a millennial, tech savvy myself, um, I, I just couldn't imagine how other people that grew up in maybe not so savvy tech, generations, that how they would be able to fill out things like weekly certified payrolls and run workforce reports and fill out all the compliance documentation needed on a weekly or monthly or even on a daily basis just to remain compliant on a job. And you were emailing these things to different people. It was insurance. It was compliance for certified payrolls. It was your W-9. It could have been your lien waiver. And I just thought to myself, I'm over here struggling to maintain just 3 to 5 jobs in a year with my crews just to get paid on time. There's no way in hell anybody, is able to do this effectively, with manual solutions. And I said to myself, there's got to be a way, because the subcontractors shouldn't suffer if they do their digital work on time, that because they email it, it went to their spam, or
You
they
got
were out
lost.
on vacation, and it's sitting there in someone's inbox, and by the time they come back on vacation, they finally get to it if they even find it. But 2 weeks have already elapsed, and you need those 2 weeks, that payment, so you can pay your bills.
Yeah,
It's a
that
it's a tough game. So
siloed, fractured information, fractured data, right? You're sitting there going, "Hey, I know I sent this, and then but my guy or my gal over there is not there." And suddenly it's siloed somewhere. Nobody else can see it. It's a terrible spot to be in.
I think it's, yeah, to me at times it seemed inexcusable, right? Because you're doing your due diligence, you're doing your work as a subcontractor, and it's not our fault that we have to suffer delayed payments because the prime contractor team, didn't have their things in order, right? And you can say the same thing about when you look in the mirror, the prime contractor also struggles in getting their subcontractors to buy into these protocols and processes. Subcontractors are always going to say, look, I'm here to do excavating. I'm here to do your sewer lines. I'm here to do your drywall. I'm not here to fill out papers all day. I'm not a paper pusher, right? So there's two sides of the coin. And I figured this is a perfect opportunity for Caster to link the two parties together, create a single system, a pipeline where the prime contractor can list all the compliance requirements, have all the templates there, all the reminders, all the communication, just making it as easy as possible, integrate with everything that you have, whether it's Procore or Autodesk or Vista, and leverage, automation where you can, leverage OCR where you can, leverage AI enablement as well. Like, make it easy, right? And that's essentially what Caster is. We are that bridge between the subcontractors and the prime contractors to maintain compliance so that everyone is connected, nothing falls through the cracks, and to make sure that subs stay compliant so they don't get delayed payments.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than being a GC and you're sitting there going, "Well, I got your payment request in, but I'm missing this, this, and this." And then they say, "Well, no, I sent that to such and such. Maybe it was in a different department or something like that. But maybe the accounting team or the accounts payable team doesn't have all their stuff together. They don't have all the documents. Again, it's kind of that siloed information. It's like, where is all this stuff at? Where is it gathered? Where do we collect it so that we can have just one conversation instead of having 4 or 5 segmented conversations about the very same topic, which all, like you say, just takes too much time by the time, we just had a conversation with a guy who's talking about some guys waiting 120 days to get paid. I mean, you got people treating these guys like the bank, and these folks, this is, and this is kind of like base level. These are the folks getting the job done out there. They're not the bank. They don't have the money. They can't stretch it that far. So who else are they stretching? When you're stretching their payments, right? You're stretching their manufacturer from their suppliers. Are you stretching are their workers getting, making sure that's good? It does nothing but run you down a wicked, rabbit hole of how many people get affected by this exact process. And it's been going on, for centuries, right? And that the money will run downhill at some point, but how quickly? Because again, especially when you're talking of a sub who's maybe front ending a lot of the cost, guess what? That's a struggle for them and for the people that work for them.
That was yeah, that was the life I lived. You kind of feel like as a subcontractor, you're sandwiched because you got pressure from the prime contractor to receive payment, from them, but then you've got your own suppliers, your own subs breathing down your neck, and you don't want to ruin the relationship with with either side, So it's a tough balance, that you have to kind of it's a you got to walk that line.
Yeah, I talked with this. Say it was a kind of a small utilities contractor a long time ago, but he was talking about this exact same process. He goes, "Hey, look, man, somebody's getting paid somewhere." He goes, "I'm just wondering why I'm not. You know, I'm wondering where that is. Why it's so caught up somewhere." Where I know other people are getting paid on their jobs, so, and it's really kind of weird because, right, there's multiple subs on a job and everybody has, relationships with each other. And sometimes they bring in subs with them, like guys they like to work with. I know this guy over here, that kind of things. And then, oh, yeah, I got paid. Oh, really? Well, I wonder why I'm not getting paid. And then that starts the chatter, right? I always felt like sometimes these deals, on a smaller level, maybe not on a large scale, but it scales anyway. But I was like, these are like brother-in-law deals. It's like you like your brother-in-law. He's a good dude, right? But then sometimes it just feels like, man, is he gonna screw me on this one? It's like, is he gonna be looking out for number one? And it's like, am I getting the up and up, or is he treating me like family, or is he treating me like something else? But yeah, I guess that's just how I kind of look at that world sometimes when I think about how we treat, our subs, or how we treat our GCs, in that way. Because once bad blood starts, it really doesn't stop.
That's right. And no, you're absolutely right. And one thing to kind of wrap up what Caster specializes in beyond that is really our 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 bread and butter, our main focus is certified payrolls. And for those listeners that don't know what that is that any federally funded project, whether it's fully or partially funded at the federal, state, local level, requires what's called certified payroll weekly reporting. And there's a federal form for it. There's a state form. They can be even lower level forms, and they all got their own unique characteristics and nuances. But essentially, it's a statement of the subcontractor basically certifying that they are paying their workers that are performing work on the job site the posted prevailing wage rate. So basically that includes the minimum base pay and your fringe pay and overtime rules depending on your craft, whether you're a laborer, carpenter, electrician, truck driver, and things of that nature. And so those, I don't know if you were taking a look at a form, especially the one that was released January this year, but man, it is, that takes a level of sophistication to kind of break apart and figure out. We need to make that easy because that is one of the principal components that holds up payment. So if we can automate that for the subcontractor, I'm happy.
Right. Yeah. Before the government's going to clear their funds, you got to fill out all the paperwork, right? And it's got to be filled out in probably triplicate or whatever however they try to pull all that together. Yeah. I and I even look at too. I know that some of like the energy providers, utility companies, one here locally, which I will not mention their name, but they're still utilizing, PDFs and spreadsheets to disseminate, here's the work that we need to get done. And here's the rates and all those kind of things. I'm serious. This comes across in like an Excel spreadsheet or even a PDF. And then they still have an application for the subs that are working for that energy company, you know what I mean, to then go into a payment portal. And you have to put in all the proper documentation within their said payment portal in order to get paid. And, a lot of these folks that are subcontractors are working and they're, waiting 90 days, maybe 120 days to get paid on this stuff that they're working on because, again, each job is a little bit different. There's a little different nuance to who's paying what portion. Like you said, if the government's only paying part of it, then, you've got paperwork to fill out for that. And then if whoever else is paying for the other part of it, you got paperwork to fill out for that. It gets very, very complex. And to your point, you got some institutional knowledge of this kind of thing that's leaving the business here very, very soon in the next 3 years. And I'm not just talking about skilled labor, but I'm just talking about the folks that worked in the office, the payroll people that understand this stuff. I worked with folks that had, 3-inch ring binders of all the information needed to know about, how to pay, scuba diving welders, in 15 different states, right? They all have different unions. They got different rates of pay. It's just crazy the amount of information, the detail that has to go in. And then you have to fill out all the proper paperwork to just get them paid. I'm not only just calculating their time and their hours and the equipment and all that kind of stuff, but it's then, okay, now what paperwork do I have to make sure that we get a timely payment? And then maybe sometimes you still wait. Do you experience that, or has Kaster kind of eliminated that for some folks?
Yeah, you bring up an interesting question about the knowledge base that is kind of retiring or moving away from the industry and welcoming a new generation in place. That is already happening on I can't uh, tell you how many countless calls I've been on that people are getting into these public works contracts and they're just forgetting the most basic stuff. One thing that is shocking to me is that a subcontractor will uh, submit a bid to a GC, uh, knowing or maybe having some idea. In some cases, they don't even know that what they're submitting is a Davis Bacon prevailing wage job. It's federally funded. And they're submitting whatever in their bid proposal. It's baked in there, the rates that they're unaware of the posted rates. So if they are significantly lower, they're going to be losing money right out the gate. If this job requires that scuba diver to be paid $100 an hour and you baked in that you're only going to pay him 75, that's a chunk, a change. And I don't know how there's ways that kind of work around it once you've been awarded. That's a whole different scope that I'll leave to another, startup to figure out when it comes to legal stuff, but we make it easy. We present what those, wages are on the job. We present what form will be used to make it easy. We will, when they're even importing or setting up their worker profiles information, we validate it up front and we notify them you're paying them, you're short on pay for this classification. So because what has happened, if you don't have a system like ours that even tells you that information up front, you kind of want to nip it in the bud up front. And if you haven't, it actually can get worse. You could actually go on reporting if you're using manual email and PDFs to fill out these forms, and you're relying on human eyeballs to review. Just do the math. Over a 12-month project, you got 30 subs, 30 times 52 weeks a year. That's how many forms you have to eyeball for each worker. No one's going to do that. It's not possible, right? If you get audited and you never knew that you got to pay that scuba diver $100 and you've been paying him 75 this whole time, you got a whole crew of them over a 52-week period, it's called a restitution. So
Yeah,
you have to go back.
it's called getting bit in my business. It's called getting bit. And that's the thing. And it only takes one time to get bit, right? Where you're like, oh, what happened? You know what I mean? And how am I going to come up with that money now? right? Because I'm still 90 days in arrears from the from the GC, right? So yeah, I get it. I absolutely get it. They make it more complicated maybe than it has to be over time, and for the human capacity to be able to, again, like you say, look at each individual, make sure the proper paperwork is filled out for each one of those. It's it's off the chart when it comes to that. So, what about state to state? I mean, are you still local? Are you finding are you national? Are you finding state to state? I know California is a bear to kind of work in with a lot of their uh, uh, say labor laws, things like that. Can you address that for me?
Yeah, so we are available nationwide across all 50 states. We do have concentrated pockets, like in the DC area, Massachusetts, out in Georgia. That the owners basically have a very archaic manual way, and the GCs aren't aware of or don't have modern solutions in place, and we fit perfectly with those. When it comes to state, I mean, some states could have their own forms. Even though there's a federal form, they'll take that form and modify it just to make it their own, right?
Hmm.
So there's complexities in that. And sometimes each state, within the state, they have different departments: Department of Housing, Department of Transportation, and various departments might have, let alone not just their own forms, but they might even require an export of the data in their own formats, which is just another layer of
Yeah,
complexity.
I've
And
seen that one before.
you gotta, yeah, you gotta upload it, which is Washington State, and like you said, the bear,
Michigan, Michigan's one of
California as
them.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's
California's one of them. Yeah, I've seen that before where, you've got a form that you have to submit not only for the federal side of things, but then they're like, hey, but by the way, we also want to see this record and this format and this. And, it's probably a CSV file of some sort. And they're sitting there going, it has to be in these rows and these columns and it has to be exactly like this. And when I was working in the tech side of the things before I was consulting, that was one of the things is like, hey, by the way, does your reporting feature have this? Can I spit out this? Right. And so then you would make customized reports so that they could actually, or you would need to make customized reports so that they could actually just use that report for the submittal to the agency that they had to, and to do that with. And then a lot of times the client wants it too, because they want to know that you're doing exactly what you said you were going to do. So again, this is forms filled out in triplicate, where it's like you need to send it to everybody and their brother to, make sure everybody's covered, everybody's happy.
That's exactly right. That's the job that Caster does, is that not only does it nip some of the wage and fringe classification errors that could arise up front, but it makes the information obvious and available to them early on. And then they don't have to worry about what form it is to fill out. We have it configured depending on if it's federal, state. You can upload the form. It'll be configured to the data will fill in those forms. And our system makes it easy. You don't have to learn how to do it. You just plug in the hours, the paycheck information, and we'll allocate the data where it needs to be, how it needs to be formatted correctly every time. And when it comes to those portals, same thing. You can configure if this job has a particular file format output. Again, you just ingest the data very simply as a sub. We'll take care of the rest the way it should be.
Okay. And I love that. What about you may have mid-sized GCs? You work with multiple, like a lot of these things are s- they have like an internal payroll where they got an ERP. I don't care. They have Spectrum, Vista, CMIC. They may be using Procore, whatever they're trying to utilize for their. Do you integrate with all those different functions or all those different ERPs for like internal payroll folks? Is that how that works?
Yeah, we integrate with a lot of the most commonly used systems out there. We uh, we just put an announcement last week that we are now an official Trimble Marketplace partner. We've been partners with Autodesk, Procore, and depending on your setup, whether you're a small, mid-size, or enterprise, uh, GC, you can use our system to do various things, to import projects, to import the directory of the vendors and each of their contacts. If you want to import or sync compliance checks. So, for example, one of our more popular configurations is setting up, certified payroll receipt and other compliance documentation. We have a green check mark listed next to each subcontractor, letting you know at a glance, are they in compliant or not? And we can sync that data to an ERP or uh, an accounting system, on the
Kind
on their end.
kind of a dashboard of sorts to sit there and go, okay, good or not good, where they stand with their compliance level. All right.
That is correct. We're also doing it. We're also beginning to expand that capability to the subcontractor side. So even though it's already easy for them to upload their information and type it into the certified payroll module, we're making it easier now by actually beginning to sync and integrate with their internal
Right.
payroll tools. So that's
So yeah, this works with GCs who self-perform and also works for subcontractors who, are working for the GC kind of thing as well. So it works kind of on all levels, and then transferable information from, Caster into whatever ERP you're using. How does that, like, let's say you don't have an integration to an ERP, you have like an API output or something like that then they can pull the information from? How's that work?
We do have APIs available. We'll handle them on a case-by-case configuration. We basically sit with your team and say, look, if you don't have certain modern tools or some of the stuff you're using is way too legacy or on-prem and it's too much of a hassle to configure with, we always come up with whether it's, some type of import upfront format. Like a lot of companies have a list of projects and vendors associated with those projects and a list of contacts. And if there's no clean way to sync, if we don't integrate with them, we just ask that you export it into like a CSV file, for example, and we'll gladly import just to get you started. And we'll come up with ways to kind of, whether it's CSV imports or other formats, we look at myself and my CTO and our product team sit with each. We always sit with accounting, compliance, and some ops person into one room and just kind of determine, all right, this is your setup currently. What's your dream scenario? Here's how Caster will get you closer, if not exactly that dream scenario.
Yeah, we were just at Groundbreak a couple weeks ago now, I guess. But I said the same thing to a couple of different people. I see 10,000 people walking around this place, and they've got this unimaginable, load of problems on their back if they're in the industry. Not on the tech side. I mean, tech side's got its own thing, but I'm saying if you're in the construction industry, I don't care if you're in civil, if you're commercial contracting, whatever you're doing, you've got 1,000 different problems that you're trying to work on. Probably none of them have to do with tech, but you're at a tech convention trying to figure out, where do I start, right? Because tech is rapidly advancing in the construction space, and it's providing solutions that they didn't realize were possible. But there's so many out there. It's like, hey, where do I start, right? And I think about this a lot when I think about solutions like yours, like the major impact that non-compliance has on a business, especially a smaller or mid-sized business. Have you guys even thought about, or have you guys calculated what the percentage impact is to their bottom line by not having something like this?
I can tell you that we provide multiples of an ROI in terms of our pricing versus the impact, not only in, expanding headcount and having to train new people, or even taking away current project managers to take on this role, which they have no business doing, by the way. But just avoiding restitution payments alone and back wages, interest on that, and just speeding up payment cycles. So, I recently got a support chat from a subcontractor out in Georgia, and they said, just want to let you know uh, that Caster has been a blessing to us, because doing certified payrolls was so complex that I had to bring in my wife or my kids to help me out do it, and all the rework and the back and forth, and they would go, weeks or months delayed on a requisition payment. So you can just imagine that in certain cases, when you're cash strapped, that's incalculable.
Right. So, I was on the kind of the payroll and timekeeping side of the world in the tech business, and we had calculated, by the time you wrote a check that was incorrect, um, the time to fix it and the cost incurred in that it came to something like $900 a check. Like if you wrote somebody, if you got their hours wrong, you got, something wrong on their paycheck and you had to recut checks. And that's just the number of hands touching it at the time, doing it. Not to mention if you had to go through, a third party payroll, to redo whatever that was. So I just, it seems like situations like this, when we're starting talking about compliance and we're starting talking about, prevailing wage and those types of things and filling out all the proper paperwork, it's so easy to make a mistake when you're trying to do it all manually, right? It's unbelievable the amount of, where you can, skip a step or oops, I missed that one. And then you're talking about for each individual that, that's working with you. I mean, the I can't fathom it almost, and the stress is one of the big things. Everybody talks about mental health in construction. And I was like, well, let's start talking about the stress first, right? Because I mean, I've been there, I've worked on jobs and I'm sitting there waiting to get paid. I'm 90 days out, I got folks calling me on the phone. Hey, when am I going to get paid for that? This over here, I got a supplier that's calling me or, when I was a GC, it was like, when I got subs that are calling me, when am I going to get paid for this? And they're stressed, and it's compounded. So not only is there ROI, I would say it probably just in, the ease of doing what it does, but there's also the ROI and the relief of stress. It takes a lot off that plate. And I think that's probably even a bigger factor with some folks than it is, a monetary factor.
Our clients, we stress as a company to have excellent customer support. We when something comes in, we want to jump on it as quickly as possible. We do not let that ticket sit around for longer than an hour, right? At least acknowledge it. And I think that in and of itself provides some relief in that we are there to support, right? We are not just a technological company, but we are there to support them, the client, and our subcontractors. And that we're there to provide guidance on best practices, right? We will jump on calls with them. We will handhold them through the setup process to filling it out, giving them guidelines that are federal or state or local. And I just believe just being able to show face, like we talked about earlier, picking up the phone, if someone has a question, and some of these people that are in charge of this compliance, they are back office, but there is a lot of stress there because a lot of times uh, it's a challenge doing it on your own. The people that we work with, they're in charge of certified payrolls for, could be dozens or hundreds of jobs. And they're just, they're receiving all of these things and they don't have the tools in place and they don't have the support. People just think, well, there's change orders and there's RFIs, submittals. Those are really what's going to drive the project in the field. But in terms of the compliance and the corporate paperwork month to month, that is a heavy burden to carry. And you have to do it right. Not only are you getting flooded with forms and information, but you have to do it right because you can't let a mistake slip through because if the owner catches it, you've got to rinse and repeat this whole cycle. And it's just, yeah, I hear you on that. So,
Well, those again, it's not like they're intentional mistakes a lot of times too. You know what I mean? Some of it could be from they just don't know what they don't know, especially if it's a newbie that's kind of in the position and they've kind of got thrown into it, which happens, right? It does happen in, I don't care, mid-sized companies, sometimes large companies, they maybe don't train them up the way that they, or they didn't have a good trainer or the trainer was not really a good person to be training that, said person. And so the mistakes get made. And when mistakes get made, then those mistakes come back, around, right? You're not dealing with them once. You're dealing with them twice, maybe 3 times, 4 times, right? And it's better to, again, correct it on the first time. And so then it kind of leads me to my next thing, technology and construction of it's getting better as to what we call adoption. People are more willing to interact with it. When technology was first kind of pressing its way in, there's still this. It doesn't quite work the way I want it to, so it doesn't get used as much. Now it's more prevalent. It's definitely taking a foothold and saying, okay, we have to have these kind of things. What's been your I asked this question, what's been your pushback against it? It seems to me, this seems like something that's like kind of a no-brainer, like that you would actually absolutely need to have this if you're doing, prevailing wage jobs and things like that.
Yeah. It's for us, I guess some of the main pushbacks that we could get is that, like we talked about earlier, that some states and some departments have their own processes and protocols. So, for example, like it would be difficult for us to sell right away to a general contractor that's large enough to cover a region that encompasses multiple municipalities and states, and each department in each state has their own portal or their own form, or they might require you can't use a Caster, you have to use our legacy system built 30
Oh
years ago,
yeah, I
you know?
gotcha.
And so it kinda goes into like, well, half of our jobs are gonna be importing stuff. So that to answer the question, our ICP, our right now as an early stage company, our best clients are the ones that are kind of in a no man's land, where they got dozens or hundreds of projects. There is no protocol. It's literally just pen and paper PDFs, or a spreadsheet, or the owner has no system whatsoever. It's kind of a
I
free
gotcha.
for all, and so we try to target those. I mentioned earlier, we have certain regional pockets that are kind of fit nicely into that. Uh, it- our system fits nicely into their processes. So um, you're going to get pushback when it's divvied up, right? Where Caster, you want Caster to cover every certified payroll job, but if the owner doesn't even require the prime contractor to review and collect it, they want it kind of direct to them, which some states have, then you know it depends on the need, timing. Those folks can eventually come back to us and say, all right, we're expanding in this one region, and by the way, the portal that the state's doing is no longer doing it. Like now we need you. So it's a matter of finding your clients that need you the most, they're in the
Hmm.
most pain, and then eventually the other ones will address later on, or they'll come to us when it gets worse.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about maybe working with the municipalities to get them to adopt this system as well?
You must have a bug in our offices here or during our Slack channels, because we are currently negotiating a handful of, and we're already underway with some pilots with some cities and municipalities, so to speak, because they also have the same problem. It's not just the subs filling it out incorrectly or having to fill it out each week. It's not just the prime collecting it from every sub every week on every job. It's the owner who has to collect it from every project, every GC, every subcontractor in their municipality. And you can imagine they don't have a software system in place. It is a free for all.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind
Yeah,
of gave
yeah,
away
it's
one of our secrets right there. But yeah,
yeah,
we
sorry,
are.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not trying to give away any state secrets or anything like that, but it just seems the logical conclusion to where this can go. Because I always talk about, okay, you're here now. We're doing this thing between GCs and subs, but there's a third party involved, right? Or even a fourth party, right? You got the governments, you got the municipalities involved in this process as well. Let's bring everybody to the table, if we can, to get this communication right. Yeah, because on the one end, right, you got your group at the GC or the subcontractor level who's submitting, and then you've got a receiving portion too. And if they're not speaking the same language, right, guess what happens? You end up with more, miscommunication, things like that, especially if it's not quite right. So I like the way that direction's going. I really do. I think that's a good idea. And it's not like I don't it wouldn't be easy, but again, nothing is in this business. There's nothing about the construction business that's easy. It's so complex. It's so, siloed information, crazy data. But that's the reason why we have, podcasts like this so we can talk about, hey, you're not the only one out there, Mr. General Contractor, or, Mrs. Subcontractor, whatever. You're not the only one that has these issues. Everybody's got these kind of same problems. There are solutions out there if you want to invest in them, like Kaster, that can help you get past this. And so on that, I want to know, how do people get a hold of you and say, hey, I want to take a look at Kaster. How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to give away my cell phone number on here.
No, don't worry.
You,
I'll give it
you'll
out to
get
everybody. Don't you worry about it.
that's exclusively to our Kaster clients. I like to maintain proximity with them. You can check us out on our website. It's www.kaster.app. We have a simple request demo form. Email us. There's a chat bot on there that you can kind of get in touch with one of us, and we'll set up a demo with you. But yeah, I mean, and once you're on board, I want to emphasize that we provide outstanding customer support, whether it's phone, email, texting, through Slack or Teams, whatever you're using, chatting through our support system. I want to emphasize that, communication. Our platform is communication, so our support team and our sales staff should have excellent and do have excellent communication.
Yeah,
So
well, and again, so that whole point, multiple forms of communication. I think you and I started this whole conversation about, some days it's just good to pick up the phone and, give somebody a call when there's a problem, or when you're trying to fix something, or you're trying to get something clear. Emails still work for good documentation. That's great. But applications like Kaster is also great to have that one kind of source of truth when it comes to this specific information. So I like where this is going, and I love the idea of creating that level of communication to make sure everybody's on board with it. And that includes the municipalities. And I will urge you to keep doing what you're doing over there when it comes to that, because I think that's an important step. Like I said, I was talking to earlier about this group here in Texas, which is a large utilities provider, who just you can't even get a hold of them. Now, you can't even talk to them about their process, this step, and they've got multiple providers, service providers that work for them, as far as subcontractors, that all have the same problem. They all have the same issues, right? And the municipalities may be the same thing. They've got all these folks that are working in these jobs in these areas, and yet they refuse to come off of their system. And one of the things I think is the biggest problem in construction is that maybe we don't recognize, or we just don't admit, that we've got broken processes. And the thing that's highlighting these broken processes is the introduction of technology, because we've got technology now that can solve these broken processes. All we have to do is figure out, how do we transfer this thought process, or this process, into this new process without gumming up the system, right? How do we make that happen? And it's going to take, I think, persistent effort from, guys like you, and the technology companies, to say, hey, here's the solutions, and then this is how we get you from where you at to where you need to be, right? Because everybody wants that an easier solution. They want to streamline it, but yet, I still, there's still a large percentage of like, well, we've always kind of done it this way, and it's just too much to change it. That adoption phase, that change management seems to be just getting in our way a lot of times.
yeah,
So,
I think to go back to an early part of the conversation, I think the idea that construction does not adopt technology, I think that has rapidly changed, especially in
mhm,
the last, I think, maybe COVID and working from home kind of was a
yeah,
catalyst to that. But
yeah,
I mean, I am on calls now with primes and even subs that are getting pretty sophisticated already. They already have these. So it's good that we've made a shift as an industry in the last few years. I believe you even spoke about it in one of your earlier podcasts with the founder. I believe it was Constructible, where they mentioned that, like, even with their clients that they speak to, that they almost have too many software solutions in place. So,
Hmm.
yeah, the job is on us, I believe, not only to provide meaningful software, that makes an impact, but also that we provide, outstanding customer support and care, that we treat these clients, that they have access to us, that we don't leave them hanging when something needs to be looked at or get their feedback right. Like, I think we got to continue that loop, because it's not just solving the problem, because you're, as a software developer, you're always going to find nuances and things to improve, and the only way you're going to do that is by listening to your users, whether they're the GC, the owner, or the subcontractors, and constantly improving. That's how, our team, we stress that we are pretty crazy about how we, if we get a feedback, we just quickly discuss it even that day. Like, hey, how do we make this better? Uh, for us, if it's not a 5-star review, if we get a 4-star, we think it's a fail.
Yeah.
We almost take it personally. And I think that, um, communication again, and guiding these contractors on making good decisions and being effective with their technology stack, is something that is on us as founders. I'll even go to, I'll don't mind telling a contractor if they're not a good fit. I'm not here to take your money and waste your time. I will tell you, you are not a good fit right now. Like, either you're too small or you've got too many processes in place. Like, it's okay to do that. So
No, that is. Some contractors probably should take that advice too. Say no to some jobs. I think that's a good idea. I have found in my years of being in this world that there are jobs that just don't make you any money. There are jobs that are just a waste of your time. Not only yours, but the other person's time. It's not a fit, right? And it's tough. I know it's tough sometimes when you're looking at needing to run money through the bank account, but you know what? Guess what? It's probably going to cost you more money to do that than it is going to be to, take it and suffer through it. Right.
yeah.
So
And
I
Rob,
get it.
it's I got a smile on my face because you learn a lot working with your dad, right? And you know, when he started working as a laborer, working his way up, he had a mentor at a large, heavy civil GC. And speaking about jobs, because I used to help him out with estimating, and I would get down when I wouldn't land a job that I just spent weeks and months, and I just thought, man,
Yeah,
I
I know
put
the
a
feeling.
killer bad, like we got a good relationship, like we got it in the bag. And I remember he would tell me, like, if we wouldn't get it, said, Joe, don't worry about it, because one of his mentors told him, sometimes the best jobs you get are the ones that you don't get.
Yeah, that
If
is
if
right.
it priced wrong, or if it's just going to be a cash suck, then, like,
Yeah, and sometimes you can't see it, but when you start to get a little institutional knowledge, you got a few years under your belt, you start to recognize the ones that are going to be like, yeah, that's not gonna happen, just because And I think in the digital world, as we move forward and we actually use our data to calculate what we're good at and what we're not good at, it's going to really open our eyes to maybe at least on the GC side of the world and even the subcontractor side of the world is like, yeah, we're not really good at this. Either we need to figure out how to train this up or get the right people involved to get us better, or we need to stop doing that because there's other people we could send it off to that might make some money off of, but we're not making any money off of it. Right. So I think that's a big deal when we start talking about, I always call it the age of AI and the age of being able to digitize and make data driven decisions, but you have to use good data. But again, you've got to start there. You've got to figure out, okay, what's my good data and how do I use it to really figure out what's driving that next job, what's driving that next project. So I think it's great. Joe, it has been fantastic, and the time kind of flies when you're sitting there just rapping about stuff. I think you got a fantastic product. I really do. I definitely could have used you several years ago when I was in the GC world. But again, that's why when I do this and I talk to all these different technology providers and stuff, like I always say the same thing. Man, I wish I would have had that when I was coming up through. So, um, for those of you out there, go check out caster.app, app, right?
Yep.
And it's Kaster .app. I will put all this stuff in the notes and the descriptions on the YouTube channel, and also it'll be on Spotify. I'll also post some stuff on X for everybody. If you guys are X followers, I've just started a new postings for that. So, Joe, man, it was great talking to you.
Robert, it was a pleasure, and thank you for having me. It was
Yeah.
great chatting. I love chatting with folks in the industry.
All right. Well, we're going to stay in touch. And for the Contact Exec world, thanks for being with us today. And we'll see you next time on the Contact Exec.
Thank you. Take it easy.